The Lighthouse Keeper and the Sea. Part 1. The First Call. People often fail to notice approaching troubles. I'm not one of them. When you live at the very edge of a continent, where solid ground battles the ocean, you learn to see signs invisible to the ordinary eye. My name is Mason Harper. 6 years ago, my rusted Border Patrol badge went into a dresser drawer, and I moved to Signal Point Cape to manage a lighthouse whose stone tower protrudes from the rock like a broken tooth of a giant. Some think I've buried myself alive on this half-forgotten peninsula, where the nearest supermarket is a 2-hour drive away. I think I've finally found my place. The pain in my knee woke me before dawn. An old wound, an unfortunate chase after smugglers on the Mexican border, a jump from a cliff, 3 broken bones, and a titanium pin as a memento. The local fishermen laugh at how I predict the weather more accurately than the meteorological service. Mason's knee senses a storm from 2 miles away and 3 days ahead, they say. This morning, my knee was screaming about an approaching tempest. I looked out the window. Leah was already gone, as always before the first rays of sunlight. My wife lives by an internal clock, tuned to the movements of tides and the rhythm of sea creatures. Only the faint scent of her lavender shampoo and a dent in the pillow remained on the bed. In moments like these, I'm always haunted by thoughts of how different we are. I am a stone, immobile and heavy. She is a seabird, soaring above the waves and never staying in one place. Sometimes I wonder what brought us together. When you're looking for a foothold in a turbulent world, you find a soul as lost as your own asterisk, as a leaner, my mother would say. And a leaner is rarely wrong. I climbed up to the lantern room of the lighthouse, where everything is always in its place. Order is not a luxury, but a necessity, especially when the smallest detail could cost someone their life. The lantern glass shone after yesterday's cleaning, a ritual I had followed every day for the past 6 years. The observation journal lay open on a clean page, waiting for the records of a new day. The first rays of sunlight were struggling to pierce through heavy clouds when I saw them, the dolphins. Even without binoculars, it was clear they were behaving strangely. I had observed these creatures every morning while drinking my coffee, as much a part of the ritual as cleaning the lenses and writing in the journal. But today, everything was different. The bottlenose dolphins, usually playful and graceful, were darting around like frightened horses. There were 8, no, 10 of them, diving and leaping as if trying to escape from an invisible threat. The smooth sea surface was covered with ripples, like the skin of a nervous animal. "Talking to the dolphins again, son." Eleanor's voice came from behind me. My mother appeared at the threshold of the lantern room with a thermos of coffee. At 67, she had maintained the posture of a professional lawyer and the sharpness of mind that had made her the terror of corporate attorneys throughout the West Coast. 3 years ago, after my father's death, she simply arrived at the Cape with one suitcase and said, "Enough. I can no longer live among concrete and hypocrisy. The sea took your father, now let it take care of me." "Something's wrong with the dolphins," she said, without even looking at the ocean. I didn't ask how she knew. Eleanor just knows such things, just as she knows when to leave her observations unexplained. Downstairs, a door slammed, and quick footsteps sounded on the stairs. Leah was back from her morning observations. I could tell from the sound of her footsteps that something important had happened. My wife doesn't just walk. She either sneaks, as if afraid to disturb the silence, or she bursts in like a sea breeze. Today it was the wind. She burst into the room with her golden-red hair tousled by the wind, cheeks reddened from the cold air, and eyes burning with the excitement of discovery. In her hands, she clutched her faithful companion, a waterproof tablet enclosed in a bright orange protective case. "Mason, Eleanor, you won't believe it," she caught her breath. "The dolphins are changing their route. My data from the last week confirms it. They're moving away from something in the south, something scaring them." Something scaring them. Those words echoed in my head. I remembered how, a day before the shootout with smugglers, all the birds suddenly disappeared from the border zone. Nature always warns if you know how to listen. I turned to the window and froze. Half a mile from shore, dangerously close to the reefs, a medium-sized white yacht was struggling against the waves, too luxurious for a fishing vessel, too small for a cruise ship. "They're heading straight for the Fangs," Leah exclaimed, also noticing the yacht. The Fangs, that's what locals called the treacherous ridge of underwater rocks that, like hungry beasts, lay in wait for careless sailors. Tilling County rescuers joke that they could build an entire fleet from the wreckage of ships that have crashed against the Fangs over the last century. Through the rising roar of the wind came a distress signal. I was already going down the stairs, wincing from the pain in my knee. Years of training and service instincts kicked in automatically. "I'm coming with you," Leah called out. "No," I cut her off. "Eleanor, contact the Coast Guard. Leah, stay in touch via radio." The rescue operation took almost 2 hours. When I returned, soaked through and exhausted from battling the elements, everyone had gathered in the lighthouse living room. A fire crackled in the fireplace, cups of hot tea steamed on the table, and in the armchair sat the rescued man, about 35, with the appearance of a Hollywood star and the charm of a politician before elections. "Alex Thornton," he introduced himself, radiating magnetism like an expensive wristwatch on a sunny day. "From the Coastal Research Foundation. I'm here because of your research, Dr. Harper. The data on dolphin behavior and coastal currents is extremely important for our project." Eleanor, sitting in her favorite chair by the fireplace, frowned imperceptibly. 35 years of legal practice had taught her to feel falsehood in people's voices as clearly as a guitarist hears an out-of-tune string. She didn't know, not yet, that this false note would, in a few weeks, turn into a deafening dissonance that would destroy our little world. Outside, a real storm was raging, driving the dolphins into deep waters along with their anxieties. And in the warm living room of the lighthouse on Signal Point Cape, a story was beginning that would change our lives forever. Part 2: The Trap. A week is long enough for poison to take effect. In the 7 days after Alex Thornton's appearance on our peninsula, a thin web of changes enveloped our home. Leah was increasingly disappearing into her research laboratory, set up in a converted fishing shed by the pier. I spent more time standing on the lighthouse observation deck, peering at the horizon, as if hoping to discern the outlines of approaching trouble. I remember every sign, untold stories, a forgotten book on the bedside table, the sound of her laughter coming from the laboratory late in the evening. Rescuers know, the most dangerous storms creep up unnoticed, like pickpockets in a crowd, revealing themselves only when it's too late. Once I entered the laboratory without warning and saw them together, bent over a computer in the half-darkness, almost touching shoulders. "Look at this data, Leah." Thornton's voice sounded like smooth whiskey, with a subtle note of smoke in the aftertaste. Migration charts, depth maps, and sonar data flickered on the screen. "We stand on the threshold of a grand discovery. Your observations are the missing piece of the puzzle." I saw how she absorbed his every word, like parched earth soaking up long-awaited rain. Thornton was an outsider in our world, polished like a stone in a stream, decorated with academic titles and worldly manners. Much later I would understand. A stone becomes smooth because water beats it against rocks for years, erasing all roughness and leaving only a hard core. In those days, she returned home later and later, with burning eyes and an absent-minded smile. "Alex showed me amazing models," she would say, waving her hands as she did in the early years of our acquaintance. "Can you imagine? We can prove the connection between changes in dolphin behavior and global oceanic processes." I remembered a different enthusiasm in her voice. When she first saw our lighthouse, when we planned our life here at the edge of the land, when we dreamed of a future that now seemed as distant as the shore on a foggy morning. Alina observed what was happening with the vigilance of a border dog. Her legal instinct, honed by decades of working with human weakness and corporate greed, was raising an alarm. One evening, she was passing by the laboratory and noticed Thornton, thinking no one could see him, photographing documents on Leah's desk. "Just making copies for the foundation," he explained the next day with a disarming smile. "Bureaucracy, you know, everything has to be documented." His smile was flawless, too flawless, like plastic flowers on a grave. Our first serious conversation with Leah happened on Friday evening, when she missed our traditional family dinner. "You're spending too much time with this Thornton," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Don't start," she cut me off. "This is important research, perhaps the most important in my career. Why can't you be happy for me?" "Because something isn't right here." I paused, choosing my words. "I've seen many suspicious types in my work, and right now my instinct is ringing an alarm." She laughed, but her laugh contained an unfamiliar note, as if a string had snapped in the middle of a chord. "You're just jealous. Alex is a brilliant researcher with contacts at the best scientific centers in the world. He can help my work receive the recognition it deserves." "And are you sure it's just about work?" The words escaped before I could stop them. Leah froze as if I had struck her. Then she turned and left, slamming the door so hard that the glass in the old frames rattled. That night, I stood for a long time on the lighthouse platform, watching the lights in the laboratory by the pier. There, bent over a computer, Leah and Thornton were studying some data. Their silhouettes occasionally flashed in the window, too close to each other for ordinary working communication. "He's playing on her ambitions." Alina's voice made me jump. I hadn't heard my mother climb the stairs. "I've seen it hundreds of times. Smart women are especially vulnerable to flattery disguised as professional recognition." I was silent. After 3 years of living in the same house, I had learned to respect my mother's observational skills. She was rarely wrong about people. And I also knew there was nothing I could do. For now. Just watch as my wife grew increasingly distant, enchanted by the glitter of scientific recognition and promises of great discoveries. The light in the laboratory went out. A few minutes later, two figures emerged outside and Leah's voice, bright and excited, carried across the quiet bay. "This is incredible, Alex. Can we really prove it?" "With your data, absolutely," Thornton replied. "You don't even realize how important your research is. It could change everything." Part 3, Evidence. I spent 7 years in the Border Patrol, tracking drug couriers and smugglers. Most people don't notice the obvious, even when it's dancing naked in front of them. That's why I couldn't sleep that night, repeatedly reviewing screenshots from Thornton's phone, which I had accidentally unlocked when he left it on the table. I'm not proud of this act, but in a game without rules, you have to improvise. In the patrol, we used to say, "A paranoid is someone who has complete information." I wanted to become paranoid. Something was wrong with the Coastal Research Foundation documents. At first glance, everything looked impeccable: logos, seals, signatures. But in the details lurked something wrong, like a grain of sand in an expensive watch mechanism. Conducting comprehensive environmental studies, right to collect and analyze data, possibility of installing special equipment, standard wording for a scientific expedition. But then, in the Additional Provisions section, I found what I was looking for. "Damn it," I whispered, enlarging the image on the screen. "Here it is." Alina wasn't sleeping either, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of herbal tea. Her reading glasses gleamed in the dim light of the old lamp. "Found anything?" she asked, without looking up from the papers spread out in front of her. I showed her the photo of the document. "Look here in the fine print. Conducting preliminary assessment of the territory for potential commercial development." "Sons of guns," Alina muttered, and steel appeared in her voice, familiar to many corporate lawyers. Classic scheme. They're using a research project as a cover, but they're actually preparing the ground for development. But what exactly do they want to build? Judging by this, she tapped her finger on a line in the document. Something big. Preliminary study of the possibility of integrating the coastal zone into a comprehensive recreational infrastructure. In human language, this means a luxury resort with a yacht club that will destroy the entire ecosystem of the bay. At that moment, my old radio transmitter, hidden in a cabinet with tools, came to life. Quiet crackling, then a familiar voice. "Mace, it's Ramon, are you there?" Ramon Vasquez, my former border patrol partner and now a security officer in the corporate sector. A man whose access to databases was, let's say, wider than official. "I hear you, Ramon. I checked out your guy. Alex Thornton, real name Alexander J. Thornhill, works for Coastal Horizon Group, a major development company from San Diego. They specialize in building elite resorts and yacht clubs." I felt a heaviness growing inside. Coastal Horizon Group. I had heard of them before. 2 years ago, they built a luxury resort on the California coast. Local environmentalists shouted about the destruction of valuable wetlands, but money, as usual, drowned out all other voices. "Do you have anything specific on Thornton?" "Oh yes," Ramon chuckled. "This guy is their territory preparation specialist. He looks for vulnerabilities, ingratiates himself with locals, gains access to information that the company later uses. He has a trail of 3 destroyed nature reserves and 2 ruined communities behind him, and not a single real scientific study." That morning when I was talking to Ramon, Leah was at sea, on another expedition with Thornton. His yacht Explorer had become a familiar sight in our waters. When she returned, it was already past noon. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes sparkled, and a smile played on her face, the same one I used to see only when we were alone. "We need to talk." My voice sounded more subdued than I intended. "Of course," she smiled, taking a bottle of water from the refrigerator. "Alex showed me amazing modeling results. We can publish an article in." "Alex Thornton is not who he pretends to be." The bottle froze halfway to the table. Leah slowly turned to me. "What are you talking about?" "His real name is Alexander Thornhill. He works for Coastal Horizon Group. All his research is a cover. They're planning to build a luxury resort here that will destroy everything you've been trying to protect for the last 10 years. Leah laughed, but somewhat uncertainly. "That's just ridiculous. You're jealous. Alex is a respected scientist who has never published a single scientific paper." I laid out the printout sent by Ramon on the table. "But he has a rich experience in destroying coastal ecosystems under the guise of environmentally responsible development." "I don't believe it," but her voice faltered. "He showed me his research." "Fakes." Elena placed a folder of documents in front of her. "Like these permits. Look here and here, veiled wording about commercial development of the territory." Leah sank into a chair as if her legs suddenly refused to hold her. She looked through the documents, and the color gradually drained from her face. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." At that moment, her phone rang. Thornton's name lit up on the screen. "Leah," his voice sounded excited and joyful even through the speaker. "I have great news. The Foundation is ready to publish our research in the Journal of Marine Biology. This is a breakthrough. We need to meet, discuss the details." She looked at me, then at the documents, then back at the phone. Fear swam in her eyes, the fear of someone who suddenly realized that the ground beneath their feet had turned into a swamp. I'll call you back." Her voice sounded hoarse, as if she had been shouting for a long time. In the ensuing silence, you could hear the waves crashing against the rocks far below. Somewhere on the lighthouse roof, the weather vane creaked, turning in the strengthening wind. It's all my research, Leah whispered. My data, 10 years of work, he just used me. Used all of us, Eleanor gently corrected, but the game isn't over yet. Through the window, we could see Thornton's yacht approaching the pier. He was walking up the path to the lighthouse, fit, self-confident with his invariable smile. A man accustomed to getting what he wants. My instructor at the academy used to say, the most dangerous predators are those who hunt in Armani suits, not with fangs and claws. But even they sometimes get caught in traps if you know where to set them. Part 4. The choice. They say that before the most important decisions in life, a person seems to hover between heaven and earth, like a bird in an updraft. Leah understood this on a cold morning when the sea presented her with its final gift. She went to sea before dawn, for the first time in weeks without Thornton's company. I watched her small boat glide over the waves, her slender figure at the helm looking so fragile against the backdrop of the vast ocean. She didn't tell me where she was headed, just tossed over her shoulder. I need to check something. Alone. When a person stands at a crossroads, sometimes only the ocean can point the right way. Its voice is older than our doubts. Later she told me what happened. How the first ray of sun had just touched the horizon when she saw them. First a short splash, unlike the familiar movements of dolphins. Then another and another. My God, she whispered, reaching for her camera. They emerged from the depths like ancient sea deities, dolphins, but not ordinary bottlenose or common dolphins. Their skin shimmered with silver in the morning light, and the characteristic markings on their backs formed a pattern she had previously seen only in old scientific journals. There are moments of absolute clarity when all doubts disappear like morning fog under the rays of the sun. For Leah, this was precisely such a moment. A species of dolphin considered extinct, Tursiops geoffrius, the Argentine dolphin which had not been seen in these waters for more than 40 years. And they were here, right in front of her. This changed everything. Returning to the laboratory, she locked the door and immersed herself in data analysis. The records confirmed her guess. It was them, the rarest species threatened with complete extinction. A message from Thornton lit up on her phone. "Where are you? We need to meet. Urgently." Leah looked at the computer screen, where frames of the silvery dolphins were frozen, then at the phone. For the first time in a long while, she saw the situation with perfect clarity. Thornton appeared an hour later, entering the laboratory with his usual confident stride. But something in his gaze had changed. There was something cold and calculating. "You were at sea this morning," not a question, a statement. "Yes." "And you found something." She hesitated. "Nothing special, just routine observations." His smile widened, but his eyes remained icy. "Come on, Leah. I saw your boat in that part of the bay where dolphins don't usually go, and your equipment was recording something for at least 2 hours." He came closer, placed his hands on her shoulders, a gesture that used to make her heart beat faster, but now only evoked disgust. "You know, the company is ready to offer you something special." His voice became soft, enveloping. "The position of director of the environmental program, a 6-figure sum in the contract, international recognition. And in return, you'll become the face of our project. Tell the world how we care about the environment, how modern eco-friendly technologies can coexist with nature. And these dolphins." His fingers squeezed her shoulders a little tighter. "What dolphins, Leah? You didn't see anything this morning. And if you did, you know, a scientist's reputation is a fragile thing, especially when evidence of data manipulation in previous studies surfaces." The threat was obvious. Leah felt nausea rising in her throat. At that moment, the sound of working engines came from the sea. A large vessel was entering the bay, not a fishing boat, something much more serious. "Ah, here come our specialists." Thornton walked to the window. "Preliminary seabed studies. A formality, actually. In a year, there will be a modern yacht club with an underwater entertainment center here. Progress can't be stopped, Leah. She watched as the huge vessel dropped anchor in the bay. Equipment for marine drilling and construction work was visible on board. "Give me time to think, Alex." Her voice sounded steady, though everything was trembling inside. "Of course," he smiled again and kissed her on the forehead. "You have until tomorrow, but remember, some opportunities only come once in a lifetime." When he left, Leah took out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used for many years. "Professor Williams, this is Leah Harper. Remember, you said you were always ready to help. I need advice about publishing. Special data. Old connections are like anchor ropes. They tarnish and rust, but in a critical moment they can keep a ship from wrecking." That evening we met at the lighthouse, me, Leah, and Alina. Looking at the lights of the research vessel in the bay, my wife made her decision. "They're here," she said, opening her laptop. "The rarest species of dolphins, living proof that these waters need protection, and I'm going to use this evidence." "It's dangerous," I warned. "Thornton will stop at nothing." "I know, that's why I'm going to play their game. Let them think they've bought me. It will give us time, and besides—" She hesitated. "I have a trump card against Thornton, a very serious one." She didn't explain, and I didn't ask. Some secrets are better left in the past. I knew this from my service days. I put my hand on her shoulder, not authoritatively like Thornton, but gently, like a person ready to share any choice she made. "We'll manage," I said, "together." Part 5: The Storm. In 20 years of living on the coast, I've seen many storms, but this one was special. The sky blackened in minutes, as if someone had thrown a funeral shroud over it. The waves, which just an hour ago barely wrinkled the water's surface, now crashed onto the shore with the fury of an enraged beast. Ancient sailors believed that the ocean is a living being with its own moods and judgments. That morning, I was almost ready to agree with them. The Coastal Horizon Group's research vessel appeared in the bay at dawn, a huge black mass against the leaden clouds. Horizon, read the inscription on the side, but I knew. This name was as fake as the company's ecological promises. Have they completely lost their minds? Alina stood next to me on the lighthouse observation deck, watching as the vessel tried to anchor. In this weather, even an idiot would think twice before going to sea. "They're in a hurry." I raised the binoculars to my eyes. "See the equipment on the deck? That's not for research. They're about to start test drilling for foundation work." People who looked like black ants bustled on the deck of the Horizon. A huge drilling rig swayed on a crane, ready to be lowered. Thornton stood on the captain's bridge next to some man in a business suit, absurd amid this maritime chaos. Some people never understand the sea. They think they can control it with technology and money, forgetting that the ocean was here long before humans appeared and will remain after us. The first serious gust of storm wind hit the side of the vessel so hard that it noticeably tilted. Waves washed over the deck, sweeping away unsecured equipment. "Mason," Leah ran onto the platform, out of breath from the quick climb up the stairs. "I just received data from the weather station. This isn't just a storm, it could be the strongest hurricane in 30 years. As if to confirm her words, a new gust of wind hit the lighthouse walls, making the old tower tremble slightly. Down in the bay, the Horizon was desperately trying to hold its position, but the anchor chains creaked from tremendous strain. The radio came alive, with a voice hoarse from interference. "Signal Point Lighthouse, come in. This is the Horizon. We have engine problems. Repeat, engine problems." I grabbed the microphone. "Understood. What's the situation?" "The main engine stalled. The backup won't start. Anchor chains may not hold. Dangerous cargo on board. Damn it." The connection broke. Panic started on the vessel's deck. People rushed about, trying to secure loose equipment. Thornton was shouting something into a megaphone, but his words drowned in the roar of the elements. Dangerous cargo. Alina turned pale. Mason, if they mean what I think they mean. Drilling chemicals, I finished. Tons of toxic substances, if the vessel breaks on the fangs. Everything alive in the bay will die, Leah whispered. The dolphins. I was already going down the stairs, wincing from the pain in my knee. The old fracture always made itself known in such weather. Where are you going? Leah shouted. To the rescue boat. They may be scoundrels, but we can't let them poison the entire bay. I'm coming with you. No. Yes. In her voice sounded the steel I had already heard when she decided to play a double game with Thornton. I know this bay as well as you do, and I have equipment to communicate with the Coast Guard. Alina silently handed us life jackets. She knew arguing was useless. We were both as stubborn as stuck anchors. The rescue boat was tossed on the waves like a splinter. Getting aboard was already a feat. Each wave threatened to smash us against the pier. From the horizon, the sound of a siren now came. In breaks between waves, we could see the crew hastily putting on life jackets. Thornton was darting around the bridge, either grabbing for the radio or shouting something to the man in the suit, who now sat on the floor, green from seasickness. Hold on, I shouted, steering the boat toward the distressed vessel. A new wave lifted us up, and for a moment we saw the whole picture of what was happening. The horizon, tilted to starboard, torn drilling equipment dangling on a crane like a pendulum, and the ominous black silhouettes of the fangs, closer and closer to the hull of the vessel. At sea, seconds stretch into eternity, especially those seconds when you realize, now everything will change forever. The first impact of the hull against the rocks sounded like a gunshot, the second like an explosion. The vessel shuddered, and from the bridge came Thornton's cry. Open the cargo hold, drop the ballast or we'll all go to the bottom. That's an order. Leah turned white. God, no, they're not going to. I saw several people rush to the cargo hold. If they open it now, all the toxic cargo will spill right into the bay. Faster, Leah shouted, clutching the handrails. Mason, faster. The boat flew up on another wave, and we saw a real fight starting on the deck of the Horizon. Several crew members were trying to prevent the cargo hold from being opened, while Thornton shouted something at them through a megaphone. The waves were throwing our little boat like a splinter, but I stubbornly steered it forward. So many years at the border had taught me one thing. Sometimes the only way to survive a storm is to head straight into it. Part 6. The Battle. Time has a way of freezing in critical moments, like a drop of resin in the sun. For me, such a moment came when our rescue boat approached the side of the Horizon. The huge hull of the vessel loomed over us like a black mountain, water lashed across the deck, and somewhere above, Thornton's people were trying to open the cargo hold with toxic chemicals. In the border service, we were taught, there are situations when you cannot retreat, when the price of inaction is too high. This was exactly such a situation. Ladder, I shouted through the roar of the storm. A storm ladder was dropped from the vessel, swinging above the raging waves. I'll go first, Leah called out, grabbing the wet rungs. In her backpack was a waterproof camera. She understood. We would need evidence. Later, recalling this moment, I would marvel at her courage. But then, in the midst of the storm, I had no time to think, only to act. The climb to the deck was an exhausting ordeal. The wind threw us from side to side, waves drenched us with icy water, and the vessel beneath us groaned and shuddered from impacts against the reefs. I climbed last, cursing the pain in my crippled knee. Chaos reigned on the deck. Part of the crew was trying to secure loose equipment, others were preparing lifeboats. At the entrance to the cargo hold, a real fight was taking place. Several sailors had grappled with people in company uniforms. Stop it, Thornton's voice carried across the deck through a megaphone. That's an order. Open the damn hold or we'll all go down. He stood on the bridge, no longer as polished and confident as usual. The wind had turned his perfect hairstyle into a wet tangle, his expensive suit was soaked through, and panic swam in his eyes. "If you do this, everything alive in the bay will die," Leah shouted, making her way to the cargo hold. She had already taken out her camera and was filming what was happening. "Shut her up," Thornton pointed at her to two of his men. "Get rid of this madwoman and take her camera." I lunged forward, but one of the crew members beat me to it, a young guy with an orca tattoo on his neck. "Don't touch her," the sailor shouted. "Captain, they want to kill the bay. These creatures are ready to destroy everything." The actual captain of the vessel, a gray-haired man with a haggard face, hesitated. On one hand, his ship was in danger. On the other, 30 years at sea had taught him to respect the ocean. "Mr. Thornton," he began but couldn't finish. Thornton pulled out a gun. At that moment, a new wave hit the side of the vessel, and everyone on deck fell like bowling pins. I saw my chance. 7 years at the border. Dozens of armed smuggler apprehensions. My body remembered even if my mind was paralyzed by danger. A roll, a sweep, and the gun flew overboard. Thornton lunged at me with a growl, aiming a fist at my face. Fighting on a rocking deck is a dance on the edge of life and death. One wrong step, one inaccurate movement, and the ocean gets a new victim. We grappled at the very edge of the deck. Thornton fought desperately, like a cornered animal. At some point, his hand found a piece of pipe and he swung it. "Mason!" Leah's cry drowned in the roar of the storm. The blow came glancingly. Years of training didn't fail. I caught Thornton's arm and twisted it behind his back. The pipe rolled across the deck with a clang. "Listen, everyone," Leah's voice carried across the deck. She held her phone like a weapon. "I'm broadcasting live. Everything is being recorded and going online. Everyone will be held accountable for their actions. The Coast Guard is already on the way." Thornton went limp in my hands, his well-groomed face distorted with impotent rage. "You don't understand," he hissed. "You all don't understand. This is a multi-billion-dollar project. They'll destroy me." "Like you wanted to destroy the bay," I twisted his arm harder. "Like you destroyed other reserves." At that moment, the roar of a helicopter engine swept over the deck. The Coast Guard had arrived just in time. The vessel had tilted even more, threatening to capsize. "Everyone prepare for evacuation." A voice from the loudspeaker cut through the roar of the elements. "Repeat, everyone prepare for evacuation." Leah continued filming as people boarded the rescue helicopter. She captured Thornton being led away in handcuffs, the captain saluting his sinking vessel, the young sailor with the orca tattoo helping an elderly mechanic climb into the rescue basket. The last to board the helicopter were Leah and I below. The Horizon continued to battle the waves, but now its cargo hold was securely closed, and the toxic cargo remained safe, at least until the arrival of hazardous waste disposal specialists. We managed to see, in a break between waves, the silvery backs of dolphins flashing. The rare species was heading into the depths, escaping the storm. Leah clutched her bag with the camera more tightly. Now she had all the evidence, both of Thornton's attempt to destroy the bay and of the existence of the endangered dolphins. "We did it," she whispered, looking at me. I silently nodded, massaging my aching knee. Victory hadn't come easily, but it was worth every drop of sweat and blood shed. Part 7, Dawn. After a storm, calm always follows. It's a law of nature, as unchangeable as the ebb and flow of tides. But sometimes the calm can be deceptive, especially when it concerns not the weather but human passions and corporate intrigues. My father, an old fisherman, used to say, "The real storm always continues after the wind dies down," in the form of consequences that can be more terrible than the storm itself. A week had passed since the dramatic rescue of the Horizon crew. The wreckage of the vessel was still visible on the reefs, a silent reminder of how close we had been to catastrophe. The cargo hold, fortunately, remained intact, and a special team of ecologists was working on the safe extraction of toxic substances. Alina sat at the kitchen table, newspapers spread out before her. "Coastal Horizon Group under investigation," proclaimed one headline. "Environmental scandal of the year. Attempt to destroy a unique marine ecosystem," shouted another. "They offered a deal," she said when I came down for breakfast. "They want to hush up the case." "And what did you tell them?" I poured myself coffee, wincing from the pain in my overexerted knee. "The same thing I told all corporate lawyers during 35 years of legal practice." Alina smiled with a wolfish gleam in her eyes. "That justice isn't for sale." In the laboratory by the pier, Leah was finishing work on an article. Her discovery had the effect of a bombshell in the scientific community. The rarest species of dolphins, on the brink of extinction, had not only survived but had found refuge in the very waters that the corporation had planned to develop. "You know," she said when I entered, "Alex was right about one thing. This really did change everything, just not the way he planned." Some say that life has a strange sense of humor. Sometimes our worst enemies become unwitting helpers in achieving our true goals. News came one after another. Alex Thornton had testified against his employers, hoping for a lighter sentence. His confessions, along with Leah's videos and Alina's documents, created irrefutable evidence. "Federal investigation into Coastal Horizon Group activities expands," Alina read aloud another headline. "Evidence of bribery of officials and falsification of environmental assessments in 3 states revealed." And then came the main news. The waters around Signal Point Cape had received the status of a marine sanctuary. A special role in this was played not only by the discovered dolphins, but also by the testimony of the young sailor with the orca tattoo. His evidence about Thornton's attempt to dump toxic substances into the ocean became the final nail in the coffin of corporate plans. In the evening, we gathered on the lighthouse observation deck. The sun was sinking into the ocean, painting the water in golden and purple hues. Somewhere in the distance appeared the spouts of dolphins, a family of rare silvery giants returning to their native waters. "You know," Leah leaned against my shoulder, "when I first met Alex, he talked about progress, about how important it is to move forward, but he didn't understand the main thing." "What's that?" "That sometimes progress lies in leaving something untouched, preserving what nature created over millions of years." Alina came up to the platform, carrying a tray with cups of hot tea. The 3 of us stood there, watching as the last rays of sun colored the sky and the lighthouse began its night watch. "I spoke with a publisher," Leah said after a long silence. "They want me to write a book, not just about the dolphins but about all of this, about how greed nearly destroyed a unique ecosystem and how a handful of people managed to prevent it." "Write it," I hugged her tighter. "People need to know." Below in the bay, the dolphins began their evening game. Their silhouettes flickered in the golden water, as if reminding us, there are things that cannot be measured in money, things worth fighting for. The lighthouse continued to send its light into the gathering darkness, guiding ships and guarding the peace of sea creatures. Its beam was like an outstretched hand of help to all who needed it, whether a lost vessel or a rare dolphin seeking a safe home. And in a pre-trial detention cell, Alex Thornton looked through the barred window at the distant lighthouse light and thought about how one wrong decision can change an entire life. Ahead of him lay a trial and long years of imprisonment, but this was a just punishment for attempting to destroy something priceless for corporate profit. The only dark secret that remained between us was that evening on Thornton's yacht when Leah succumbed to his charm. She never told me about it, and I never asked. Some things are better left in the past, like the skeletons of sunken ships resting on the ocean floor, hidden from sight but forever changing the landscape of the underwater world. And yet, looking at the sea every morning, I think we were lucky. We not only saved the bay and its inhabitants, we saved ourselves. From lies, from cowardice, from the temptation to trade the eternal for the momentary. The beam of our lighthouse continues to cut through the night darkness, showing the way to all who seek a safe harbor. And in this, perhaps, lies the main meaning, to be a light amid the storm.